Hi, this is Risa, your stitch buddy. This video is a stitch-along guide to Jill Kipnis's 3D flower Stumpwork kit for the Clematis flower, which would complete the review of the kit I posted on my channel previously. I bought this kit on Etsy, the link of which is provided below. You can click on the kit review link above to watch that video. I'll be your stitch buddy throughout the process. You may stop and resume anytime during the video and while you're working on the project. So let's get started. First things first, I'm going to use a light pad to put the design together before I trace it onto the fine linen fabric provided in the kit. I've photocopied the pattern at the back of the booklet. It would have been nicer to have the pattern already printed on the cloth, but tracing it is no big deal. So here it says the leaves and the petals should be of a certain size, and I have to make sure the photocopy reflects that. So it says essentially 2 centimeters for the leaves and 2.5 centimeters for the petals Stumpwork. I'll need to follow the design according to the instructions. Now the purple lines represent the Stumpwork and the dark lines represent the Flatwork, from what I understand. What I'll do first is cut out the pattern so that it's easier for me to put the design together. Now that that's done, I need some sellotape to tape the Flatwork first to the light pad, followed by the Stumpwork leaf according to the design. For the petals, I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petals that I need to trace. So, and I only have one template, so I'm going to cut out this one template and I'm going to use it under another piece of paper to trace out the flower. You don't really need to place the petals onto the fabric, but I like to have the full reference of the design on the fabric. Now I'm going to place the fabric onto the light pad and trace the pattern. Using an 8-inch hoop, I'm going to see if the pattern is correctly placed on the fabric. Now here I'm using my own 8-inch hoop and not the one provided in the kit. I'm going to use 2 heat erasable friction pens. Black for the Flatwork area and red for the Stumpwork. Here's the completed design on the main fabric. Now don't forget to baste or tack the thin muslin fabric onto the main fabric before you mount it onto your 8-inch hoop. Let's begin with the stitching. I'm going to start with stem stitch with the dark green floss and then use the light green floss to whip around the stem stitch. The first part of the stem is done, so I'm going to whip the light green floss around the stem stitch. As you can see, I take the back of the needle so it doesn't get caught in the fabric or in the floss, and I simply take the back of the needle under one of the stem stitches and whip it around. For the leaves, we start with a simple split stitch to outline the leaves first before we proceed with carrying out the satin stitch to fill in the leaf. Now we stitch a few straight stitches here in the center of the leaf to give it a little bit of a lift when we stitch the satin stitch. Moving on to filling in the leaf center with satin stitch. Now instead of stitching all along one side of the vein of the leaf, I stitch the satin stitch essentially in the form of a V, where you come out on one side of the leaf outside the outline, go back in the center of the leaf along the vein, and then come out again on the other side or the opposite side and re-enter along the vein in the center, and you keep doing that as you move down towards the end of the leaf and complete it. cutting out 6 wire lengths of 12.5 centimeters. There we go, so it's approximate. I have a wire cutter to do that, so I have one. Here we have the 6 wires that we will need to form the Stumpwork petals. Using the heat erasable black pen, I've already traced out 6 petals onto the linen fabric, and now I'm drawing out the directional lines for the long and short stitch. I've completed 3 petals already. Take the wire and use a flat nose plier to bend the wire on the top so we get a pointed top, sort of a somewhat pointed top, and then you adjust the wire along the pattern that's drawn on the linen. So it takes a little bit of dexterity here, and then once you've gotten the shape, you snip off one end right at the pointy part with the cutter, place it on to the fabric and the pattern to see that the size is correct, and then the other side you fold over with a little overlap of about 3 millimeters and snip that off as well. Now you have the frame for the Stumpwork petal. Then you couch the wire with the purple couching thread that was provided in the kit. First I'll couch the bottom part with 1 stitch, and then I'll couch the top with the 2nd stitch. And this is mainly just to fix the wire in place on the fabric so that it doesn't flop around. Starting with 2 strands of light purple thread, I'll start the long and short stitches, starting somewhere near the center of the petal and running the stitches onto one side. So you basically need to ensure that these stitches are close together and go under the wire or very close to the wire. For the second row of stitches, you take the purple thread again and start somewhere generously above the second row of stitches and continue stitching long and short stitches on one side first and then moving on to the second side. For the final row, take the dark purple floss if you have some, and again generously start at the second row of stitches and continue with long and short stitches until you fill the petal. The final step is using buttonhole stitch. You come out onto the fabric on the outside of the wire, take the thread over the wire and then leave some slack in the thread so you can pull the needle in between the thread and the wire, and you continue in this manner, essentially coming out on the outside of the wire, taking it over the wire, and then taking it back into the thread and pulling it out, and you keep continuing in this manner. I'm a bit worried as I have only 2 strands left of the purple floss that was in the kit, and I still have to finish these 2 petals, and this particular strand has only 4 strands left. So let's hope we can finish off the petals, and I'm really happy that I included the dark purple of my own to finish off the bottom of the petals. I'm going to continue using the dark purple thread here for the buttonhole stitch, and then I'll switch to the light purple to continue the buttonhole stitch along the rest of the petal. Now I'm going to switch to the lighter purple. I'll start by inserting the needle on the outside of the wire, just inside the first stitch of the dark purple buttonhole stitch, and then I'll continue along the top part of the purple with this color and then switch back to the darker shade of purple to finish off. In case there are any gaps in the buttonhole stitch and you see the wire, you can take the matching thread and go back in and cover the wire by taking the needle just below the loop of the thread. You end off by using the silver thread for the veins. piece of the stump work is the leaf, and I've cut off 12.5 centimeters of the wire, just like for the petal, even though the leaf is smaller. And I'm going to use the pliers in a similar fashion to form the pointed part of the leaf. Now, the leaf here is much smaller and requires a little bit more dexterity here on my part. So let me try to form it. The leaf also has a little bit of a dent, as you can see in the diagram, on the top right hand corner, which I will have to try to form. Now, unlike the petal, we don't cut off the ends. In fact, we twist them around for the leaf. Trying to form the dent here. I think I'll try and use a little pointed scissor that might help to create the dent on the top here. There we go. I think I've got the shape. Now what I'm going to do is cut off these extra long wire bits here and just leave a little sort of stem that I'll twist around and start couching the wire for the leaf. I'll use a similar pattern satin stitch for the leaf here. The only difference is that I will take the thread and stitch it on the outside of the wire. So essentially come in the center at the vein and then take in the thread on one side of the leaf and then on the opposite side and continue until I finish the leaf. To end off, I'll twist around the light green thread around the wire and then end it off with a knot. The next step is to dye the leaf with fabric markers. I'm using Pro Marker, which I bought on Amazon, and these are alcohol-based fabric markers, so they spread really well, And I've put down a mat to protect the tabletop that I'm working on, because these are permanent markers and they could mark the tabletop. So here we go. We'll start marking the thread. Since it's alcohol based, I really just need to tap the marker on the fabric and it will spread pretty smoothly. I'm going to dye the purple petals as well, even though the instructions don't say I need to. I'm going to use Purple Pro Marker pen for this, and I just think it'll give it a much nicer effect when we complete the stump work. Of course, some markings onto the mat, and being permanent markers, they're not gonna come out. So I'm gonna lay some paper onto the mat and then essentially start dyeing the fabric over that to protect the mat. To create a clean edge, I'm going to fold the fabric behind the buttonhole stitch and use Fabri-Tac of fabric glue to stick the fabric on the back. Now that the glue is on the petal, I'm going to fold first the top part and the bottom very close to the edge of the petal, and then slowly fold all the edges. You may need to put a little bit more extra fabric glue on the top that has been folded so that you can then stick the rest of the fabric on it. Finally, you create a hole with your stiletto or awl, like I'm doing, on the flat work that's we had completed earlier, and you essentially take the thread first and needle it through the hole, and then you insert the wires. To fix the leaf, I will stitch the wires by running stitches between the backing fabric and the main fabric. So without piercing the main fabric, I'm just going to run a few loops under the wire and under the backing fabric to stitch and fix the leaf wires in place. With regard to the petals, we don't need to insert them into the main fabric. After forming the petals into a shape that I want, I'm just gonna essentially stitch the ends of the petal in the center with the same dark purple thread. To make the stamens, I will use the memory wire that was included in the kit and cut 2 small pieces. I'll have to use a little bit of fabric glue to twist the ends into little round shapes that look like stamen before I insert them into the fabric. And as with the leaf, I'll stitch the stamen ends to the backing fabric. To fill in the space in between the stamens, we need to do a few French knots, so I'm going to use a similar shade of thread as that of the stamen memory wire, which is sort of like a slight pinkish purple, and stitch a few French knots, so about 3 or 4 loops around the needle to create the French knots. Here's the final piece. I ironed it so all the markings from the heat erasable pen has been removed, and I shaped the leaves and the petals. So this is fully complete and it looks absolutely lovely. Is it a beginner's kit? I would wager that it's more suited to someone who's very familiar with embroidery already, as you would need to be a bit knowledgeable of how to do long and short stitches. And I must say, stump work does require some dexterity and managing of the wires while stitching it. But otherwise, great project. And if you like it, you can get it on Etsy. The final piece is to finish off by pulling all the thread together and and stitching a white felt fabric on the back, so then your piece looks nice and finished and ready to be hung on the wall. Thank you for watching the stitch along video with your stitch buddy Risa, and if you like it, please do click on the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for joining, and see you next time. Bye bye.